Hi, everyone. Welcome back. It is bitter cold here tonight in Philadelphia. Snowed a little bit this morning, and now it's just so cold and windy. Hope you're staying warm wherever you are. I'm back for another day of No One is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood, and we're still in this first section of the novel where the narrator is describing, if we want to call it that, the experience of the internet. So I'm going to pick up where we left off and read for about 10 minutes or so. We'll see what kind of section break that takes us to. But if you're following along for a class or something like that, I'm on page 9, at the top of page 9. All right. So every day their attention must turn, like the shine on a school of fish, all at once, toward a new person to hate. Sometimes the subject was a war criminal, but other times it was someone who made a heinous substitution in guacamole. It was not so much the hatred she was interested in as the swift attenuation, as if their collective blood had made a decision, as if they were a species that released puffs of poison or black ink in a cloud on the ocean floor. I mean, have you read that article about octopus intelligence? Have you read how octopuses are marching out of the sea and onto dry land in slick and obedient armies? Aha, she yelled, the new and funnier way to laugh, as she watched footage of bodies being flung from a carnival ride at the Ohio State Fair. Their trajectories through the air were pure arcs of joy. T-shirts turned liquid on them. Just look what the flesh could do when it gave in, right down to the surrendering snap of the, "What's so hilarious?" said her husband, resting sideways on his chair with his blade-like shins dangling over one arm. But by then she had scrolled down to the rest of the thread and seen that someone was dead and 5 others hanging half in and half out of the world. Oh God, she said as she realized, oh Christ, no, oh God. At 9 o'clock every night, she gave up her mind, renounced it like a belief, abdicated it like a throne, all for love. She went to the freezer and opened that fresh air on her face and put fingerprints in the frost on the neck of a bottle and poured something into a glass that was very, very clear. And then she was happy, though she worried every night, as you never do with knowledge, whether there would be enough. Inside the portal, a man who 3 years ago only ever posted things like, "I'm a retard with butt AIDS," was now exhorting people to open their eyes to the power of socialism, which suddenly did seem the only way. Her pronoun, which she had never felt particularly close to, traveled farther and farther away from her in the portal, swooping through landscapes of us and him and we and them. Occasionally it flew back to light on her shoulder, like a parrot who repeated everything she said, but otherwise had nothing to do with her, who in fact had been left to her by some old weird aunt, who on her deathbed had simply barked, "Deal with it." Mostly though, it passed into you, until she had no idea where she ended and the rest of the crowd began. There was an iconic photograph, crisp in its nurse's uniform, of a woman being bent backward and kissed by a soldier on V-Day. We had seen it all our lives and thought we understood the particular firework it captured. And now the woman had risen from history to tell everyone that she didn't know the man at all, that in fact she had been frightened through the whole encounter. And only then did the hummingbird of her left hand, the uncanny twist of her spine, the grip of the shoulder's elbow on her neck became apparent. "I'd never seen him before in my life," the woman said. And there he was in the picture, there he was in our minds, clutching her like victory, never letting her go. Of course, it was always the people who called themselves enlightened who stole the most. Who picked up the slang the earliest? To show what? That they were not like the others? That they knew what was worth stealing? They were the guiltiest too, but guilt was not worth anything. There was a new toy. Everyone was making fun of it, but then it was said to be designed for autistic people, and then no one made fun of it anymore, but made fun of the people who were making fun of it previously. Then someone else discovered a stone version from 1,000,000 years ago in some museum, and this seemed to prove something. Then the origin of the toy was revealed to have something to do with Israel and Palestine, and so everyone made a pact to never speak of it again. And all of this happened in the space of like 4 days. She opened the portal. "Are we all just going to keep doing this till we die?" People were asking each other. As other days, they asked each other, "Are we in hell?" Not hell, she thought, but some fluorescent room with eternally outdated magazines where they waited to enter the memory of history, paging through a copy of Louisiana Parent or Horse Illustrated. It was in this place where we were on the verge of losing our bodies that our bodies became the most important. It was in this place of the great melting that it became important whether you called it pop or soda growing up, or whether your mother cooked with garlic salt or the real chopped cloves, or whether you had actual art on your walls or posed pictures of your family sitting on logs in front of fake backdrops, or whether you had that one Tupperware stained completely orange. You were zoomed in on the grain, you were out in space. It was the brotherhood of man, and in some ways you had never been flung further from each other. You zoomed in on that warm grain until it looked like the coldness of the moon. What are you doing? Her husband asked softly, tentatively, repeating his question until she shifted her blank gaze up to him. What was she doing? Couldn't he see her arms all full of the sapphires of the instant? Didn't he realize that a male feminist had posted a picture of his nipple that day? She had become famous for a post that said simply, "Can a dog be twins?" That was it. Can a dog be twins? It had recently reached the stage of penetration where teens posted the cry face emoji at her. They were in high school. They were going to remember, can a dog be twins, instead of the date of the Treaty of Versailles, which, let's face it, she didn't know either. This had raised her to a certain airy prominence. All around the world, she was invited to speak from what felt like a cloud bank about the new communication, the new slipstream of information. She sat on stage next to men who were better known by their usernames and women who drew their eyebrows on so hard that they looked insane, and tried to explain why it was objectively funnier to smell it sneezing with EA in there. This did not feel like real life exactly, but nowadays, what did? In Australia, where she was inexplicably popular, she sat on stage under melting lights with a fellow internet expert who bore the facial satisfaction of being Canadian and whose hair was visibly gelled with $32 gel. He spoke well and cogently on a variety of subjects, but the pants he was wearing were cyber pants, the sort of pants we wore back when we believed we had to skateboard through the internet. He also wore rave goggles at all times, so as to protect himself from the blinding light of cyber, which came from a sun that he carried with him directly in his line of vision, which was the star of the future set in the old bone socket of the sky. Sneezing is funnier, right? She asked him. No question, he answered. Sneezing all the way. During these appearances, there entered into her body what she thought of as a demon of performance, an absolutely intact personality that she had no access to in ordinary times. It was not just inside her, but spilled a little beyond. It struck huge gestures off her body like sparks from a flint. Always when she watched the performances afterward, she was aghast. Who is that woman? Who told her she could talk to people that way? The problem, she sounded like a militant, like a lesser known suffragette. A foreign gnat was stuck in her mascara and her mouth tasted of the minutely different preparation of coffee that Australians found superior to the latte. The audience looked at her encouragingly. The problem is that we're rapidly approaching the point where all our dirty talk is going to include sentences like, fuck up my dopamine website. Why had she elected to live so completely in the portal? It had something to do, she knew, with child chained up in the yard. Her great-grandmother, an imaginary invalid, had kept her firstborn son chained up to a stake in the front yard so she could always see what he was doing through the window. She would have preferred a different maternal lineage. Aviatrixes, jazz kittens, international spies would have all been preferable. But child chained up in the yard is what she had gotten, and it would not let her go. Every country seemed to have a paper called the Globe. She picked them up wherever she went, laying her loonies and her pounds and her kroners down on counters, but often abandoned them halfway through for the immediacy of the portal. For as long as she read the news, line by line and minute by minute, she had some say in what happened, didn't she? She had to have some say in what happened, even if it was only, what? Even if it was only, hey. It was a place where she knew what was going to happen. It was a place where she would always choose the right side, where the failure was in history and not herself, where she did not read the wrong writers, was not seized with surges of enthusiasm for the wrong leaders, did not eat the wrong animals, cheer at bullfights, call little kids pussy as a nickname, believe in fairies or mediums or spirit photography, blood purity or manifest destiny or night air, did not lobotomize her daughters or send her sons to war, where she was not subject to the swells and currents and storms of the mind of the time, which could not be escaped except through genius. And even then you probably beat your wife, abandoned your children, pinched the rumps of your maids, had maids at all. She had seen the century spin to its conclusion, and she knew how it all turned out. Everything had been decided by a sky in long black judge robes, and she floated as the head at the top of it and saw everything, backward, and turned away in fright from her own bright day. Colonialism, she hissed at a beautiful column while the tour guide looked at her with concern. Whew, all right. Pretty interesting. I can't wait to get to the very end of this novel and talk about what it tells us about the conditions we're living in and what it means to be an online or offline person, if there is even a difference or such a thing. But that's it for today. Stay warm, take care, and I hope I'll see you here tomorrow.